Today we are going to be talking to Jenny Best of Solid Starts. If you have a baby or are about to have a baby or have been through the introducing foods phase of parenthood, Jenny Best has such amazing wisdom and just a way of putting parents at ease when it comes to introducing solids to your baby. And now it's all in a book that I'm really excited to talk to her about called Solid Starts for Babies. So we're going to jump right into it. And I'm just about to start this chapter of my life with Ford. So I have a lot of questions.
So I've been meaning to ask you, are you thinking about how you want to do solids differently now that you have a third? Is it different perspective, different goals from where you were with your first? I feel like
Yeah,
that changes over time, right?
it totally changes, and I feel like you build confidence as a parent. Like, the first time I did it with Lila, I was so nervous and anxious and definitely stayed strictly on the purees and just doing, what was gonna be the least stressful experience, and it's probably why I ended up with, her being such an extremely picky eater. But also, you told me last time that part of that is genetics, so
hmm
she gets that from me. But then my second daughter, Eloise, is much more adventurous with her palate. When I'm eating salad, she comes over to me and, asks for the lettuce, which Lila would never even think of putting in her mouth. So both experiences have been slightly different. But then now I have, my son Ford, and he's 5.5 months. So we're gonna just, start this. And I'm excited to be able to try it with your app and also your book accessible, because I feel like with a third, you're sitting at the table with your other kids and they're eating, food that's not
Yeah.
just purees. And so I already see it with Ford. He like watches me eat. He watches like the food. He watches food come out of, whatever package it's in or off the plate, and just is like drooling. So I think he's definitely ready to start, eating food. And I think he would be over the puree thing very
It's not what
quickly.
you're eating. It's not as
No.
not as exciting for
Yeah. So
sure.
I think
I
that,
think there's a reason why the first child tends to be more picky than the subsequent kids.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes sense. And then also, like, I think he's going to want to look at what his siblings are eating and be like, I want that.
Yeah, for sure. And he can have that.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, I want to talk about, of course, introducing solids, but also why your method of doing that is so different than, what I did the first time around with Lila,
Yeah.
and what I think historically our parents did, which is strictly giving us purees and the many ways that that can be done, but also, incorporating the way that you do it too.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, research around how kids eat and learn to eat is fairly new. This is not something that was around when Gerber invented baby food back in the 1920s. And look, prior to the invention of commercial baby food, there weren't like Vitamix machines and, commercial blenders that could make perfectly textureless food, right? I mean, were parents straining things and trying to create a consistency that would be easier for baby? Yes. But they were also taking a bite of meat, chewing it, and handing that over as well. So I think that babies were exposed to what I would call real food or the family meal much earlier in their eating journey than they were sort of like when you and I were probably raised, right? So things have changed really dramatically. But what we promote at Solid Starts in terms of offering chewable food right away, and you could do purees if you want, but letting baby self feed and letting baby really pick that up, decide to eat it, decide to put it in their mouth, all of those things, that independence from the get go, we are finding is really important in forming a positive relationship with food at the table, in terms of learning body like hunger and satiety cues. When a parent is spoon feeding, it's actually easier to overfeed your baby spoon feeding purees than it is to let them self feed as much food as they want. And the reason is because the parent's controlling the pace, right?
Mhm.
So, and thinking, oh, I need to scrape this last bit of the jar or the pouch or whatever it is because that was the pre measured amount and baby should have that. You start to get a little away from letting the child trust their own satiety cues of when they're hungry and full. So things have changed a lot. There's a lot
Yeah.
of research now supporting baby led weaning, but it doesn't have to be an all or nothing game. It doesn't have to be, a zero sum game, a black or white decision. You can do a mix of both. I love combo feeding approaches. I just want to see parents let baby reach for the spoon and decide to put that in their own mouth. That not only lowers the risk of choking, because when baby's brain is more ready to, they've cognitively decided, I'm going to put that in my mouth, it's more ready to, facilitate the 50 plus muscles needed for a safe swallow. It creates a much more positive dynamic at the table when baby is deciding to put that in their mouth versus you.
Ideally, obviously, we want them to be able to use a spoon, but in the beginning, it's just like a mess. Like they're grabbing. I love watching the videos on your account of kids like taking a whole like piece of meat and just like sucking on the piece of meat or just like taking a vegetable and putting it in their mouth. Um, but I mean, we really as parents need to just also accept like this is going to be a messy process if we're going the baby led weaning route, especially, and just like set it up to embrace that.
Well, personally, I think it's messy either way. I
Yeah.
actually think that yogurt pouches are probably the
Oh, they're
messiest food on
good
the
boys.
planet. And
Yeah.
you're not going to be controlling that at age 2. The child will not let you. They will grab it from you and really resist you doing it for them. And for good reason. They're developmentally ready at 6 months old to feed themselves, and they want to do it. Most babies actually really want to do it. They'll reach out for the spoon or they'll reach out for the food if it's offered in the air. So it's going to be messy either way, in my opinion. And actually, and here's a really beautiful thing, some of the least messy chewable foods, like think about like corn on the cob or meat on the bone or a carrot stick or celery, or think of like sticks of food, are actually the cleanest. And those foods, those long, sort of hard sticks of food, like corn on the cob or even like a mango pit, advance oral motor skills like jaw muscles, all the things required to, learn to chew and to safely swallow food. They advance those skills more quickly. You've probably heard me say a few times, if you want like 10 minutes of peace to yourself, whether it's at a restaurant or just so you can clean up and, have some quiet, offer your baby corn on the cob. You've never seen so many quiet babies. We were just on Good Morning America,
I
and the
saw
host
that.
was the host was like, these babies are so
I
quiet. Like,
know.
what did you give them? Did you give them Benadryl? I'm like,
Yeah.
no, they are eating food teethers and they're so happy with those big pieces of food, but they're also likely to be a lot less messy. Now, look, that doesn't mean that every meal is going to be clean. It's not. It's going to be messy. You got to brace for that. But there are a lot of benefits to mess as well. One of the things we've seen with really controlled spoon feeding, where the parent will not let the child grab the spoon, won't let them touch the food because they don't want to mess or for whatever reason, worried about choking, that kind of thing, is that the child then equates mess is bad and food is messy, so therefore I should not touch it. And what you'll see is a 2 or 3-year-old who will refuse to touch even like a donut because it's sticky, right? Who has no other sensory aversions, who will touch water, who will touch sand, who will touch grass and play in the, playground normally. But if we're teaching kids that food is messy and messy is bad, they can develop a negative association with just touching it at all. So that sensory exploration is really important from the get-go. We like to say mess is good, brace for it, just prepare for it, put a good splat mat down. I did the snap footy pajamas because I don't want to be cleaning broccoli between the toes at
Yeah.
the end of the meal. Footy pajamas with a smock, a long sleeve smock over that, and then a catchy like style bib over the smock.
Amazing.
And
I
then I
love
just
that.
stripped them at the end of the meal and washed their hands in like a bowl of water, and then we went on our way.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many different things that come into play as far as like, like I'm thinking, okay, a splat mat, that would be great, or the choking part of it. But I mean, for someone who's in my situation, like I have a 5.5-month-old, we're about to start eating foods. What are the first steps to prepare for that experience? Whether it's like what foods I'm going to introduce or what I need.
I love this question so much because I think parents often jump to what products do I need? What
Mhm.
cup, what spoon, what bib, what high chair? When in reality, you actually don't need any of those. You really don't. Do they make it fun and nice and maybe more enjoyable? Sure. But we like to say how you show up at the table matters more than any high chair, what high chair you buy, that kind of thing. So I would actually first read our book because it sets up, there's this beautiful chapter around trust, trusting yourself, trusting your baby. And the really important part of all of this is how do I get myself as a parent to a place where I can trust baby to explore, where I can trust that baby's body will safely protect them from choking so that they can form their own relationship with food. The more the parent is kind of controlling the process or making them use the spoon that they bought or eating in a certain way because that's less messy or just hovering because you're nervous, the more likely it is the kid's going to develop a negative association with eating. So I would say read our book first because it really, I think, puts all the evidence in plain language and in a real like aha kind of a way to go, oh, oh, I see how many parents can actually be part of the problem here. And to step back and let your child explore a food that might feel unnatural for you because you've been seeing only purees or only baby food for generations at a time can require a bit of a trust fall. So start there. And then instead of obsessing of like, what's the perfect first food or what's the perfect product to buy, what's the perfect high chair, I would say, just start following baby's lead. Now, would I offer a piece of toast with peanut butter smattered, all over it as baby's first food? Probably not, but some people do. You want to be a little bit careful about introducing allergens. And, wheat is an allergen and peanut is an allergen. So I wouldn't combine them in the first meal. But in our app, I think there's a nice kind of choose your own adventure type experience. You can be a little more independent and just look up a food and be like, we're having chicken tonight. How do I make chicken safe for a 6-month-old? Okay, I'm going to look that up. Or if you're like, no, I need my hand held through this and I need to tell me exactly what to serve my baby for the first couple of weeks, we have that experience as well. But none of that matters as much as how you show up at the table and give your baby the space to explore.
One of my girlfriends had a baby like 2 weeks before I had Ford, and she's also a chef, so she has an advantage in this situation. But she started by letting her son sip on bone broth, and like stick his tongue in bone broth, which I'd never seen before. And then
Yeah.
she just sent me a video of her son with like a huge piece of steak, just like chewing on the steak at dinner. But I, of course, am like, she texted me and was started asking me questions. And I was like, do not ask me because I would download the app and get the book because I don't know if it's like the stress that comes for me with my girls of introducing them to solids and just like being nervous that I feel like I blacked out and I don't really remember the whole experience or what that is. But I would love to be able to like say, "Oh, I'm gonna have him start on bone broth," because not only does that sound so healthy, but also it sounds very like an easy, great way to
Yeah.
introduce foods.
Yeah, for sure. There is no perfect first food. There are some foods that I think are better in terms of helping baby learn the skills of chewing and things like that. And there are some foods that are certainly more nutritious than others.
Mhm.
But the reality is that most babies aren't even swallowing much of that food until closer to 9 to 12 months of age, if they've had consistent practice with chewable foods. So I think we're wired as parents, and I think particularly as moms, to focus on how much baby is eating and how much they're actually swallowing. And a lot of parents are really nervous when they start baby-led weaning. Oh, my baby's not swallowing out, or they're spitting out the puree. What do I do? And it's simply because baby hasn't learned the skills to move the food around in the mouth and munch it and, swallow it in that way. And that's actually okay. I think I like to tell parents put a stake in the sand for around 12 months of age. That's when we want to see baby eating like around 3 meals a day, similar to the foods that you yourself are eating. But how you get there from 6 months to 12 months, whether it's 1 meal a day or you're starting with 2 meals a day, or sometimes taking a couple days off because baby is sick and not having it, or you're sick and not having it,
Mhm.
how you get there is totally okay. It doesn't have to be a linear process. You can find your own path. So I love the chefs out there who are embracing baby led weaning and going for the hunks of meat and all of that, because we know, and our team of feeding and infant swallowing specialists will tell you that those foods advance the skills far more rapidly than textureless food and purees and pouches will do. But it's really important that both you and baby try to have fun in this process and make the table a place that baby wants to be.
Mhm.
And that's more important than the particular food you start with.
So if you're, in a situation where you're about to start introducing solids and you're wondering what to start with, what are like 5 different foods? I know there's not one that's perfect necessarily, but what are 5 different options or 3 different options that parents can say like, okay, I can start with that.
Yeah, we love unbreakable sticks of food. Not only because baby can't actually take a bite from it, so it helps calm anxiety for a nervous parent, but it pokes and prods the mouth in a way that helps the brain more quickly form a mental map of the mouth. There's a really fun fact that our feeding therapist on the team taught me years ago, which is this: if you take a bite of a hard boiled egg and let's say like a little piece of shell was still on it, your brain kind of finds that shell in your mouth and spits it out without you really having to think about doing that. Baby's brain does not yet will not yet feel that shell and know exactly where it is in the mouth. The brain has not formed a mental map of the mouth yet. And so we like sticks of food that kind of act like teethers that poke and prod baby's mouth over and over again, because that repetitive poking helps baby's brain learn, oh, this is over there and that's over there. And all of the other thing it does is it cues the tongue to move sideways. It's a little bit geeky, but it's really important. If you put like a chicken drumstick, you could even take all the meat off if you're nervous, and you let baby kind of poke around on that, you'll see their tongue dart over to meet the drumstick, and it's a reflex. Well, what does the tongue need to do to chew food? It has to take the food in and move it to the side for chewing. So we love sticks of food like a chicken drumstick with or without the meat, corn on the cob. A mango pit is babies love a mango pit. If your baby is resisting solids, try a mango pit. I have not yet seen a baby not love a mango pit. The inner seed of a mango with most of the
Yeah.
fruit taken off. Gosh, a roasted whole carrot that still has a little bit of some structure to it. It's not too limp or floppy, but things that act like sticks of food in the mouth, particularly unbreakable ones, are our favorite first foods for babies. But you could look up in our app and pick any food that's appropriate for your food culture or that you love to see how to safely prepare it for a 6-month-old baby. And it could be baby's first food. And that's one of the things I really love about our app and wanted to really kind of impart to the world, which is that, we don't need babies, say, in Nigeria, having their first food be a Western made puree, which is sometimes perceived as superior than the local food culture because of corporate marketing and the power of all of that. Um, Almost any food in your local food culture can be made safe for baby and can be baby's first food as long as it doesn't have honey in it.
When I introduced solids the first time with Lila, I was at the pediatrician who said to me, okay, so it's time to start introducing solids. And he handed me a packet of, a kind of step by step process with categories of what to do, what not to do. Then with my second daughter, I was handed some information about different products to buy to introduce to allergens at a certain
Hmm.
amount. And I was like, this just seems so complicated.
Yeah.
What is there any, truth behind any of that allergen introduction or step by step introduction that we are
Yeah.
handed by doctors?
Well, the first piece of information I want to share with you, which is a bit startling, is this. It takes an average of 17 years in the United States for new research to trickle down to the frontline medical community. So I'm not surprised that you're getting outdated handouts. We also should just acknowledge that pediatricians don't study infant feeding,
Yeah.
or even infant nutrition. It's not part of their core curriculum. Um, and they're really almost like can be a traffic cop. Like they identify a problem and then send you to a specialist, like a dietitian or a feeding therapist or an allergist, right? So and as I say that, I just want to add that, at least in the United States, the scope of a pediatrician is from 0 to 18 years of age. Like, that is a lot of
Big
research
range.
to keep up with. Huge. And I think structurally that's probably an issue. I'd love to like advocate change for that. So it's not surprising that you're getting some information that might be a bit dated. Now, to the food categories and to the allergens. Is introducing certain food categories before others better, worse? Will it create picky eating? There's not really research to show that like if you do vegetables before fruits or kind of taste training in that way that it will produce the outcome that you want. However, there is a ton of evidence and research around offering a wide variety of textured food and different colors of foods, different textures. So, not always puree, not always chewy, right? All the different kinds. Like, think about a salad. It's going to have some crunch in it. It's going to have maybe some soft beans or soft cheese. It might have the stickiness of a salad dressing. There's a lot of textures going on there. Yet we think, oh, that's not safe for a baby. It actually is. And almost salads can be deconstructed for a 6-month-old in a safe way. But we think, oh, that texture is not for a baby because we've been so indoctrinated to believe that baby food is a necessity as starting this when it's actually not. So I would say instead of focusing on particular foods or food categories, try to fold baby into the family meal as soon as you can. So we're not thinking I'm going to prepare a completely separate meal for baby, 3 times a day, but instead, what do I want to eat tonight? And how can I take some of that either off my plate or out of the pot and make it safe for baby? How can I modify the existing family meal and make it safe for baby? Because the goal is to get baby into your family meal, not to create a separate meal. And we set up that dichotomy, right? Of like, and then we have separate kids meals, and then we have separate shaped chicken nuggets, and now they're dinosaurs
Yeah.
shaped and all the things. And that is set from early on, and that comes from the notion that kids and babies should have separate foods than us, when it's actually not true. So focus on variety, focus on folding baby into your family meal as soon as possible, and you will likely see a child who is more willing to explore foods than a child who wasn't having that experience. Now, when it comes to allergens, there is a lot of new research, and if you were a mom back in I don't know, 2000, you might have been told by your pediatrician, hold off on all allergens, don't serve egg, don't serve peanut, don't serve wheat until age 3. Don't
Wow.
even serve them at all because it has such a conservative approach. Well, what we found in that period of time is that pediatric allergies skyrocketed in babies and children, increased like 80% during that period of the hold off recommendations, and that they actually had it kind of all wrong. A study was done in Israel for why babies in Israel don't seem to have peanut allergy. What they found is that this food that was often served to babies and toddlers, they're called Bamba puffs,
Yeah.
have peanut in them. And so these kids in Israel were getting peanut earlier than, other babies around the globe, right? And what it showed is that, and there are whole groups of studies, really like high level research here. What the subsequent research and tests showed, and it's been consistently followed up for the last 2 decades, is that the earlier and more often a child is exposed to a common food allergen like egg or peanut, the more likely they will not develop the food allergy. In other words, you can, to a certain extent, genetics do come into play, but to a certain extent, you can prevent food allergies by offering the child that food early and often.
What about choking? Because that's another big, fear factor and stress factor for so many parents is like, I love the idea of solid of baby-led weaning and introducing solids and allowing a baby to explore those things. But then when you say like, "Oh, a corn on the cob," I'm like, "That's so cute." But what if one of those kernels comes off and slips into their throat? Like, then what?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
part.
I have a beautiful answer for you. When a baby feeds themselves, regardless of the food size or consistency, the risk of choking is reduced. And that is true at any age, whether it's your 90-year-old grandfather in a nursing home or a 6-month-old baby. So the fact of letting baby feed themselves, meaning you're not putting the food in their mouth.
Right.
And think about it. Think about it. If you've had those wedding, I don't know if you had a wedding where your partner stuffed the cake in your mouth, that
Sure
kind of
did.
tradition, and your reaction is to retract your head and you flinch and pull back. I want you tonight to have your partner feed you, and just for once or twice,
Mhm.
whether it's putting a piece of food on your tongue or putting a spoon in your mouth, and to see how your throat feels and how your brain feels and how your body feels. It's not a pleasant experience to be fed.
No.
Um, and there are ways to do spoon feeding in a way where you really like wait for baby's interest, you wait for them to open their mouth, they're leaning in, they're truly ready. But most of the time, what we see is that baby's brain is not ready to accept the food, and that's why it's safer to let baby feed themselves. So if you are still not convinced and you're like, well, that all sounds good, but I'm worried about that corn kernel, I'm worried about that hunk of meat, and I'll talk about that in a second. Let baby finger paint with purees. It's safer for them to dip their fingers in a bowl and get, yogurt on it, whatever, and kind of suck that off, or to preload a spoon and hand that over. It's a bit messy because the food will fall off unless it's like kind of clingy. Greek yogurt is great, by the way, instead of the runny yogurts. But
Yeah.
let baby decide, like let baby's brain see the food, decide it wants to put it in its mouth, and bring it to its mouth on its own time. Doing that in and of itself reduces the risk of choking because baby's brain is more ready. Choking, in essence, has less to do with the characteristics of the food, certain shape and size, although there are particular ones that increase the risk, has more to do with baby's body and whether it's ready to accept the food and to munch it and to swallow. There's 50 plus muscles involved in like munching and chewing and swallowing. And the brain coordinates all of that activity, which is also why we say try not to let your child walk around while they're eating, or be distracted at amusement parks or movies or TV, because it distracts the brain from doing the work it needs to do to make for safe eating. So does choking happen? Yes, but it's really rare. And I think because of media and social media, it's more like in our face than it would be, prior to the land of digital technology, where you're not hearing about a choking incident in Australia, right? But it's less than 1% of deaths under age 3 are because of choking. And half of fatal choking incidents aren't on food. They're on things like toy parts and marbles, a pistachio shell, a watch battery, a bead from your earring. So the fear of choking is really out of proportion these
Mhm.
days with the statistical likelihood of it happening. And that's something we're trying to really educate parents on, if for not any other reason than to have more fun in this process.
Yeah.
Our fear is really out of proportion with the likelihood that it will happen. I'd love to see parents channel that anxiety around choking into teaching a child how to safely eat the food versus avoiding it. Like you hear the parents, oh, I'm going to be quartering grapes until college. Well, I hate to break it to you, your child's going to get whole grapes well before you're ready, and you won't
Right.
be there.
Yeah. I know. It's helpful to have also like have the data and the research and also be able to put things into perspective like you're saying, so it kind of reduces the stress and just reminds parents and even me as like a third time parent. It's like, you have these natural stressors and then you hear what you're saying, you're like, oh, okay, I don't need to be as concerned about that, or I can
Yeah.
try this in a way that makes me feel put at ease. So um, I never stop learning from you. Thank the Lord for you, because I'm like every single, time I'm like, ooh, I just like this makes me nervous. And then you're like, no, you don't need to be nervous about this. So I'm so excited to be able to get my hands on your book and also have the app that I have on my phone because I feel like I'm really armed with such great knowledge and also reduced stress and anxiety about this experience the third time around. So I'm excited.
Do you have a first food picked out? I've been meaning to ask you for
I
4.
don't have a first food picked out. I literally just watched my friend that I mentioned, I watched her do the bone broth and the big slab of steak, and I was like, "Oh my god, what am I gonna do?" So I
I feel like as a third child, he's gonna probably grab something off your plate and it'll happen like
yeah,
before it won't be an intentional moment. Be like, okay, we've
yeah,
had our first food.
yeah, I know. He's gonna be like yeah, he's like doing it all the teethers that I have for him are all food looking teethers, so I feel like he's gonna be like,
Love that.
"Yes, now this has a flavor to it." So it'll be good. Well, thank you so much. This was so informative for me personally, and I know for everybody else who listens. And congratulations on your book. And I'm so excited to have
you.
the book and the app with me as I embark on this journey with my third. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck. Holler if you have any questions along the way.